On March 31st, State Auditor Matt Dunlap, a Democrat appointed by Democrats, released his annual audit report for 2024. The audit showed that $2.1 billion in state spending through the Department of Administrative and Financial Services was at risk for fraud, waste, corruption, and abuse. According to Dunlap's audit, the state has basically been disregarding all of the rules and regulations around no-bid contract spending, both for state-funded awards and for federal-funded awards. According to Dunlap, this has put the state at risk of lawsuits from private sector companies who have missed out on an opportunity to bid on a contract that the state's offering, but it's also placed the state at risk of having a federal investigation come in and look at how some of this federal money was spent. The Maine Wire is the only outlet that has published anything about this audit. The Maine Public, the taxpayer-funded outlet, published a cursory story that didn't really dig into the details. But most of the media in this state are content to just ignore this audit, even though it was written by a Democrat and criticizes a Democrat administration. This isn't some political document prepared by Republicans to critique or attack the Mills administration. This is a constitutionally required audit publication that looks at how the state of Maine is spending money. And the findings of this audit couldn't possibly be worse. The defense that the state of Maine, the Mills administration, has put out is that the audit doesn't show any fraud or corruption. But that's not what audits do. All the audit said is, if there was fraud and corruption, we wouldn't know because there's no cop on the beat. There's no one inspecting these no-bid contracts that are proposed by various state agencies. There's no one checking to see whether these audits are actually following the rules for no-bid procurement of goods and services. Now, the Maine Wire went and found 4,500 different documents, procurement justification forms that are filled out in relation to these no-bid contracts. One of those documents caught our eye. It was a no-bid contract given to the Bangor Publishing Company. Now, you might not know this, but the Bangor Publishing Company is the company that owns both the Bangor Daily News and a little-known marketing firm called Pulse Marketing, LLC. As we dug further, we found that since Governor Mills has taken office, Pulse Marketing has received $2.4 million in contracts from various state agencies. We dug a little further to see maybe Pulse Marketing has just received a lot of contracts from state agencies over the years. But no, under Governor LePage, Pulse Marketing received 0 in state contracts. That means $2.4 million of taxpayer money has flowed to the owner of the Bangor Daily News since Governor Mills took office. None of this has been disclosed by the Bangor Daily News, even when they report on topics that relate to the work of those contracts. Included in the documents that the Maine Wire found while we were investigating the no-bid spending that the auditor criticized in his 2024 report was a pitch document that the Bangor Publishing Company prepared to give to the Department of Labor to justify why they're the best marketing company to receive a $400,000 contract funded by taxpayers. If you look at the document, it's not at all clear that the Bangor Daily News and Pulse Marketing are two different companies. This is important because this is likely the defense that a reporter or an editor for the Bangor Daily News would muster. They would say, Pulse Marketing, that's a totally separate company, nothing to do with the news side or the opinion side of what the Bangor Daily News is doing. But the pitch document tells a different story. If you read that document, the Bangor Daily News is the central pillar of the value that Pulse Marketing is offering to the Department of Labor and likely any other client that Pulse Marketing has. Over and over again in that document, Pulse Marketing puts forward Bangor Daily News as partners in a public affairs campaign. Anyone who contracts with Pulse Marketing is going to have access to Bangor Daily News staff, and they're going to have access to audience insights that the Bangor Daily News has accumulated. More importantly, they're going to be able to access the brand value that the Bangor Daily News has accumulated over the past 100 years as a legitimate news outlet. This partnership between the Mills administration and Pulse Marketing / Bangor Daily News / Bangor Publishing, it's just one company that's receiving this government money. This partnership raises a number of interesting ethical questions for the Bangor Daily News, chief of which is, Is this money flowing into the Bangor Daily News from the Mills administration influencing their coverage? Are there any stories that have been published in the Bangor Daily News because they've been receiving $2.4 million and counting from the Mills administration? But even more importantly, are there any stories that they're not publishing because of the money that they're receiving from the Mills administration? In her response to us, Jennifer Holmes, a senior vice president at the Bangor Daily News, said that they receive advertising money from Republicans and Democrats, that it shouldn't imply any political bias on their part. And they explained that the reason why they only started receiving money when Governor Mills came into office from state agencies is because that's when the Bangor Daily News acquired Pulse Marketing. But if you look at the contract archive, Pulse Marketing never received any contracts under the LePage administration. Only when Pulse Marketing became part of the Bangor Daily News did the floodgates of taxpayer money open for the Bangor Publishing Company. The $2.4 million and counting that the Bangor Publishing Company has received from taxpayers raises a number of interesting questions about how it might be impacting the news and opinion side of what that media outlet does. You have to ask yourself, are there stories that have appeared in the Bangor Daily News without any disclosure that benefit Pulse Marketing's clients? And you also have to ask, are there stories that haven't been told, that haven't been printed because of the partners who are paying Pulse Marketing large amounts of money, courtesy of John Q. Taxpayer? I will note the Bangor Daily News hasn't published a single story about the audit published on March 31st that showed the Mills administration was abusing the no-bid contract process and disregarding the rules around no-bid procurement for goods and services. Could it be that they don't want to report on contracts that they themselves are receiving? Who knows? According to the contract documents reviewed by the Maine Wire, that marketing campaign was intended to create some commercials, some digital advertisements, a Facebook page, and a website that lists job openings in the healthcare sector. A lot of this stuff already existed, so it's unclear why we needed to spend another $400,000 to accomplish it. But the thing that I think is important here is this was an incredibly newsworthy thing that was happening. Thousands of healthcare workers were being driven out of employment at hospitals and nursing homes and other medical fields. At this time, the Bangor Daily News could be covering that. They could be covering the consequences of a controversial policy that the Mills administration was implementing. Instead, they were getting paid $400,000 to run advertising to help solve a problem that that policy was creating. I think it's a legitimate question to ask. Did the $400,000 flowing into the coffers of the Bangor Daily News influence their coverage around the vaccine mandate and the fallout, the problem, the workforce shortage that that mandate created? And did it influence their coverage of the ensuing lawsuits from healthcare workers who did not want the experimental mRNA injections and instead quit? That contract is just one example of the amount of money that's flowing to the Bangor Daily News from the Mills administration. These contracts continue. Just this month, in April of 2025, the Bangor Daily News has renewed some contracts, expanded some contracts, and received new contracts from the Mills administration. And this is also part of a pattern with Governor Janet Mills. As the Maine Wire reported exclusively last year, the Mills administration, through the Department of Education, gave close to $120,000 to the Maine Trust for Local News in order to print state-written articles touting the education system. To put that differently, the Mills administration gave the Portland Press-Herald and its sister newspapers $120,000 of your money so that they could run propaganda. These are articles written by some communications flack at the Department of Education pretending like the state's education system is doing great, when in fact our test results are in the gutter. Any self-respecting news outlet would have said, no, we're not going to publish your propaganda, but the Maine Trust for Local News instead greedily accepted all of that money and ran those articles. None of this happened when Governor LePage was in office. None of this happened when Governor Baldacci was in office, frankly. This appears to be a new phenomenon, particular to Governor Janet Mills. Money flowing from taxpayers, including federal awards and state awards, into media outlets. Now, I'm sure at both the Maine Trust for Local News and the Bangor Daily News, the journalists there would say it hasn't influenced their coverage at all. But I think it's a fair question to ask, both at the opinion pages and the news pages. Is that true? Is it true that the money, $2.4 million in the case of the Bangor Daily News and $120,000 that we know of to the Maine Trust for Local News, is it true that this money, in a time when newspapers are struggling to stay afloat, isn't influencing their coverage? It's something that these outlets certainly haven't been forthright about. If you peruse the archive of the Bangor Daily News, you can see plenty of stories that they wrote about the vaccine mandate, about direct care workers, about hospitals and the healthcare worker shortage, but nowhere did they disclose that they are paid agents of government propaganda. And I'll note once again that the state auditor released a report, a constitutionally mandated report, criticizing the use of no-bid contracts by the Mills administration, including the kind of contracts that both the Maine Trust for Local News and the Bangor Daily News have benefited from to a considerable degree, and neither of those outlets have bothered to cover the fact that he released that audit. Here at the Maine Wire, we can make you one guaranteed promise. We will never, ever receive a dollar of taxpayer money. And I think that makes us, in fact, the only investigative news outlet in the state of Maine that isn't funded by Democrats who control the government.